to get started here. Okay, so I want to officially welcome those of you who are on time to topic number 5, which is mindfulness. The most direct way for me to describe mindfulness is to begin by asking how many of you are multitasking during this webinar. That's kind of what mindfulness is about. We're going to discuss this and what it means to live a mindful, conscious life as our webinar progresses. And we'll look at some of the tools Judaism provides to help us be more aware of the small details of our everyday lives. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and probably I will disappear. That's what's been happening. So if anybody would like to speak up, just do, because I can no longer see you, even though I should be able to see you.
Nina,
yes.
Nina, this is Sue Isler. I don't know if maybe some people need to mute because I'm hearing a lot of background noise.
Yeah, it's probably because I work in an office. It might be from me. I'm going to lower my microphone.
Okay, great. Yeah, if anybody needs to mute, please mute. And I think the background noise is stopped. So
Yeah.
okay, so I just start with a brief discussion, as I always do, reminding people to join and post on our inspirational Facebook group, because that's a nice way for us to keep in touch with each other and to discuss our monthly topics. And then I'm going to move right into the theme. Oh wait, there is someone who needs to mute. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm muting everyone, but if you want to speak, unmute yourself, okay? Okay. And if I don't hear you unmute yourself, then go into the chat. I'm going to put the chats up so that if you need to say something and I don't hear you, I will see you in the chat area. Okay. So we run on autopilot, and we do things like walk through doorways or pay bills, or we might even depend on autopilot to get us through slightly more difficult situations, like maybe driving to some extent, things that we do all the time. But sometimes we need to turn off our autopilot and make conscious choices and live in the present. I'm going to look at some of the things that are themes. Living present-minded and full awareness of the moment-to-moment reality is a fundamental construct within traditional Judaism. Daily prayer and Shabbat are Jewish approaches to practicing conscious, mindful living. And as we go through the webinar, we're going to think about distractions that prevent us from living fully present in the moment. And I think each year there are more and more of them, and most of them are related to our cell phones. But there are other things as well. And how can we learn and practice conscious living in order for it to become integrated into our daily lives in a meaningful way? That's what we're going to look at today. And when you're doing this in your groups, see if you can come up with tools to help you slow down and see the world. You might start by making a list of distractions that prevent you from fully living in the present moment. And you and the participants in your groups should know that we're going to be exploring Jewish approaches that will help us all learn how to practice conscious living. I'm going to unmute everyone for a second, just in case. Is there anyone who has something they'd like to comment yet?
Owner must have left.
Yeah.
So we're all here.
I'm going to mute you all again. Oh, hold on.
Here we go.
Okay. Okay. So the first text is called Listening with Our Eyes. And while I read this text, think about mindful conscious living. It's been described as about living in the present moment. And think about the difference between living in the present moment and living for the present moment. And have you ever had circumstances where mindlessness had real consequences, like accidents, or maybe by accident insulting someone or making a mistake? I know I've had some. I think everyone probably has. And how can we become more mindful of the ways that we act, speak, and interact with others? So it's a really nice text. I'll read it to you. It's from an excerpt from a sermon by the Reb, as quoted by Mitch Albom in his book, Have a Little Faith. It helps us to define what's meant by the idea of mindfulness, conscious living. A little girl came home from school with a drawing she'd made in class. She danced into the kitchen where her mother was preparing dinner. "Mom, guess what?" she squealed, waving the drawing. Her mother never looked up. "What?" she said, tending to the pots. "Guess what?" the child repeated, waving the drawing. "What?" the mother said, tending to the plates. "Mom, you're not listening." "Sweetie, yes I am." Mom, the child said, you're not listening with your eyes. So with this in mind, let's go back to these questions. And actually, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so that I can see you guys, and I'm going to unmute you. So let's think about this. Mindfulness, conscious living has been described as about living in the present moment. So looking at this story, what's the difference between living in the present moment and living for the present moment? I'm going to start out by saying that it has to do with thinking about the future. You can live in the present moment, but know that you're gonna set the table in a minute, but stop for a second and listen to your child. But living in the present moment, that's living in the present moment. Living for the present moment would be like, I forgot all about dinner. What is it, sweetheart? And then like an hour later, like, oh no, I burnt dinner. So I think that's one of the things in this story. And we can think about if we've ever had a circumstance where mindlessness has had real consequences. I can think of a few, but since today is Tu B'Shvat, I'm going to tell you about one I did that was really bad. I used to work for JNF in the education department, and we used to have beautiful posters printed every Tu B'Shvat, and I was lucky enough to be the person who designed these beautiful posters. And I don't know, I wasn't thinking, and I spelled Tu B'Shvat. I spelled Shabbat like you spell Shabbat. Instead of Tet, I put in a Tuf. And it didn't get sent out to the schools, but it did get printed and onto the truck. So that was a pretty bad mistake. Fortunately, the printer was my friend. He redid it for free. But, it's so easy to just do this. I don't know if anyone else wants to share an embarrassing moment of that sort. Okay, well, let's go to this one. How can we become more mindful of the ways that we act, speak, and interact with others? How many people have friends or spouses or children who are really irritated by their texting and reading texts when they could be talking to each other? Am I like the only one? It's hard because we have so many things competing for our attention now, and I feel like it's very easy to want to answer an emergency or see if it's work, or like, why is this email coming in? Why is this text coming in? And our phones are always letting us know when this happens. So I think that that's one of the, we can become more mindful if we have, when we're in an important place, we, turn off our notifications. But then there's also speaking and interacting with others, like being interested in them, empathizing, asking somebody, how they feel about something. A lot of times I think people are just thinking about what they're going to say next, not what the person they're speaking to is saying. That's another thing about living in the moment. With that in mind, would anybody like to say anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Annette.
Okay. The main thing that comes to my mind, my son is an adult, so I don't see him doing that very much. But my husband and I are both retired, and we go to the movies a lot. And it's most of the people that go to the movies during the afternoon are older people like us, so you don't see a whole lot of kids. But what's interesting is as soon as the movie is over, within seconds, everybody turns their cell phones on. And I like to think about the movie I just saw. I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a surgeon, I'm not, running a business. It can wait, and it just blows my mind. It's just the weirdest thing.
It's interesting that you say that because I think that's very true nowadays. My kids are adults too, but I feel like I have to have my phone right next to me just in case somebody needs something. And you actually, Annette, you were right. I'm sure that my adult children will not have a really major problem if I don't turn on my cell phone right away. And I'm sure that thinking about the movie or what you're doing is, very important. And that's probably something we could all think about as we try to think of, being more mindful about how we interact with others. I'm going to go back and share now if nobody else has anything to say. Okay. Here we go. So let's look at the next slide, which is about Berachot HaShachar. They're in the daily morning service, and they demonstrate the ability of prayer to remind us of our blessings and our obligations to ourselves and to the world. Originally, Berachot HaShachar were recited at home when you first woke up. before you came to the synagogue. And each of the blessings corresponded to an action you would do when you woke up. And these actions and the corresponding blessings were to be a reminder of the blessings of and the work of daily life. So reciting daily prayers helps us to become more mindful of the present and helps us focus on what's important and critical in our lives. As we pray, we think about it. And there's a lot of noise and distractions that prevent us from seeing what's important to us. And so it's interesting, before we read the prayer on the screen, I'm going to point out that this version of Birchot HaShachar, it doesn't reflect the Orthodox view, which would, it says, Asani Kirtono, made me according to his will, which is changed throughout time. Human understanding has changed. It used to refer to the pain of childbirth, as far as I'm aware. If anybody has a different view, let me know. But anyway, here they are. And as I'm reading them, think about how they might correspond to things that you do in the morning. So, praised are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, for enabling us to distinguish day from night, for making me in the divine image, for making me a Jew, for making me free, for giving sight to the blind, clothing the naked, releasing the bound, raising the downtrodden, creating the heavens and the earth, providing for all my needs, guiding us on our path, strengthening the people Israel with courage, crowning the people Israel with glory, restoring vigor to the weary, and removing sleep from my eyes. So we can think about our morning routine. For example, giving sight to the blind could be opening my eyes when I first wake up. Some of the others, there's actually the Or Chadash Sidur, there's a commentary by Reuben Hammer, and he says that beginning with the fourth blessing, each blessing in this prayer corresponds to an action. So giving sight to the blind, opening your eyes. Clothing the naked, you can say that when you get dressed. Releasing the bound, you can say when you stretch. Let's see, there's some more of them. Making those bowed down stand upright. That's raising the downtrodden. You can say it when you stand up. Creating the heavens and the earth, literally spreading the earth over the waters. You can say that when you put your feet on the ground. Guiding us on our path, actually in Hebrew it's making one's steps firm, and that you can say when you walk. Strengthening the people Israel with courage, you can say when you're putting on a belt, or a tefillin if you do that. Crowning the people Israel with glory, you can say when you cover your head. Removing sleep from my eyes, you can say when you're washing your face. It might be interesting to, for you and your participants, to think of their actions that are meaningful to you that these things correspond to. And how they focus your thoughts on your day that's coming and what's important to you as the day is going on. Any comments from anybody?
Just does mindfulness lead to, it seems like it leads to appreciation, or is it appreciation leads to mindfulness?
I think you're right the first time. And that's my opinion, and we could probably debate it, but I feel like when you're mindful of what's around you, it can lead to appreciation. On the other hand, it could also probably lead to, like, you know, my shoes are too tight and I'm really annoyed. So maybe the other way around. But I feel like just being in the moment and, as you said, appreciating what is going on around us has to lead to gratitude on some level, you know, and appreciating. I had my corneas replaced a few years ago. I was going blind. And one morning I got up and I just saw my teapot sitting on my stove. And it was so awesome to me to see the sun coming in on it and to be able to focus on it. It's little things like that. I think sometimes, unfortunately, you have to almost lose them to appreciate them. But if we're mindful every day, we can have that same good feeling, I think. But that's something to keep in our minds also, that mindful and how prayer can help us. I mean, if I guess I knew about seeing, there is actually, we'll get into the Berachot Nehanin about seeing or appreciating things as they happen. That's a really good tool for a more mindful, conscious life also. So then we look at our own prayer life and the difference between fixed prayer, which is, the prayers that are in the Siddur that you say, or even prayers that like Shehechianu, that you don't have to look in a prayer book, but you're going to say it when you might say it if something new or important, you've reached a milestone. And then there's spontaneous prayer, where you're like really happy about something and you just say a prayer on your own. For centuries, rabbis debated how a person fulfills the obligation to pray. Is the obligation fulfilled through the recitation of fixed words at fixed times? Or is the obligation fulfilled when we acknowledge God with full intention through personal words that come from the heart when we're moved? Clearly, there's a piece of this debate that's forced, and the message behind the debate is that both aspects of prayer are necessary and serve different purposes in Judaism. And Judaism acknowledges that prayer is not an easy practice. It takes work on the part of the individual. And these texts that we have here, there are two of them, they're examples of the struggles that are part of an active prayer life. Before we read them, I want to give some hints that might be good. An interesting way to introduce the topic of fixed versus spontaneous prayer is to ask your participants, or I'm going to ask you, about your own lives. Are you a person who does the same exercise routine every day at the same time? Or are you someone who wants to mix it up? Or other things, do you try to be more regular in your life? Or do you go out of routine? And there are benefits and drawbacks to both of them. Doing something at the same time helps it to become part of our lives, something we learn to know so well we can deepen our knowledge of it and our understanding of it. Like, I don't like to watch a movie more than once if I already know what's coming. But and people who do, they might get a deeper appreciation of it. I do like to do the same exercise routine every time because I feel like then I'm mastering it. So there are benefits and drawbacks of both. When we make changes, we're sometimes able to better hold our attention and keep ourselves focused and interested, rather than having our minds wander to a new topic. And that can go to prayer as well. You could read the same prayer every day and your mind is off somewhere else. Or you can focus on it and it becomes deeper because the words are familiar. So the first text is, this challenge is one that I also face daily when I pray. I want to be able to express each word of prayer with my full intention. I want to mean what I say. I want to know what I mean. And I want to say what I mean. And I want to be able to pray this way while using the words of the traditional prayer book. So I want to bring my attention fully to those texts, to know what they mean and to mean what they say, and to have them say what I mean. And I want to pray without being distracted, without my mind wandering elsewhere. At the same time, I also want to be aware of what it is that distracts me, so I can learn the content of my own heart and mind. If I can do this in prayer, then perhaps I will be in the fullness of my life as well. And so live mindfully, aware of the truth of my life. That's from Rabbi Jonathan P. Slater. Then there's the other way of looking at it. It's a poem from Your Word is Fire, which is the Hasidic Masters on contemplative prayer. Prayer is never repeated. The quality of each day's prayer is unlike that of any other. This is the inner meaning of the Mishnah's words, one whose prayer is rigid, prays without supplication. This can be seen even in the thoughts that distract us from true prayer. They are different every day, each day in its prayer, each day in its distractions until the Messiah comes. It's an interesting way of looking at it. And because these are pretty heavy and complicated texts, hi, I see your back, Andrea. There are a couple ways to do it. You could do them as a whole group. You could read them together. And you could give participants some time to reflect. They could write a little bit what they think about them, responses to the two questions, and the personal moments of fixed prayer. Then they could turn to a partner and discuss the role and the distraction of prayer. And then you could conclude with the whole group. You could ask them this, my favorite question. As we sit in communal prayer, we're often distracted by the people around us. How can we turn this distraction into an opportunity to be more mindful of the people in our lives? So I have to say the people that distract me are usually people I don't know. And I'm the worst because I'm not this way, but I'll just say, wow, that's a really interesting outfit. Or, just things that are so not related to what I should be thinking about. I find it a lot easier to pray when I'm alone. But I don't know if other people feel the same way. How do you guys feel? Do you prefer is it easier to concentrate when you're in a group? Oh, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Me?
I will. Yeah. Okay. There.
I don't even think I could live with this.
It really depends what the situation is. If it's during Shabbat, when I'm in a group, yeah, kind of in unison, it's kind of nice. When there's a silent prayer, then I'll just turn a page book and then the prayer book and kind of reflect. On my own, not so much. I can't say like I'd be at home and I'd just sit in prayer. No. So it's for me, it's easier in a group.
It's interesting. I was just at the Reformed Jewish Educators Conference, and they
So
have
yeah.
they have like great prayer leaders with wonderful music, and that kind of group I found it very helpful. But a lot of times I like to just meditate. It depends. But that's also relating to mindfulness and conscious living, being conscious of your inner thoughts and using prayer to help you to get to them. Another thing you could do,
I would go up to
I just
75.
mute everybody because I don't know who's.
That's my maximum.
So another thing you can do, depending on how big your group is, you can examine prayer from the benefits of fixed prayer and the drawbacks of it. And then you can have each group to chart their ideas about a particular angle of prayer on a large paper and post their lists when they're complete. Once each group posts their thinking, participants can look at the charts and stand near the one that expresses your view the most. Some people might be in between their charts. And then they can, if you have time, they can talk with people who are standing near them about why they selected what they selected. And then I'm going to show you this because this is interesting to look at. This has worked great for me. I've done this with seniors. This is from a seniors at a JCC. I've done it in conferences. It's called mobile prayers. It's an interesting activity if you want to do something hands-on. You'll need some fun foam shapes, a hole puncher, 2 dowels, and some ribbon. I can send you a PDF on how to do this if anyone wants. Just email me after. So each person chooses a prayer. I'll have a siddur around for them, or I'll post something if I have a screen that'll help them if they want. And then they can think about personal prayers, and they can either do a spontaneous prayer or a personal prayer, or one on each side. And then when they choose a color that they like, a color marker, a color fun foam, and then everybody writes what they're thinking, and obviously you have to keep the hole at the top. Then you make the mobile, just cross the 2 dowels, tie them together, tie the yarn to each individual prayer, and hang everyone's prayers together from the dowels. So each shape represents an individual prayer, and the mobile represents each individual's prayers joining with those of their friends and going up together. When I did this with seniors, they just loved it. It really was meaningful to them. And it was interesting for people to share what their thoughts and aspirations are also.
They were always
Go, Sue. Go, Annette.
Oh, no, I was wondering which did you choose? Just so you chose various prayers, correct?
Right. So there are a couple of prayers that I chose, and I don't actually remember. The one was, I'm going to do, I'm going to send it to you if you want. There was obviously, there were the lessons of appreciation, because those are both inspirational, you say for seeing a rainbow or hearing thunder or meeting a scared person. So I had those up on the screen, and then there's a couple of other prayers I had. And if you want to do that, I'll send it to you. Because I can't remember off the top of my head. I might have had Yotzer or there are different things. It was beautiful when I did it with the seniors, because they have lived lives and they have really deep thoughts, and they are not afraid to express them. And it was just, and they were so proud because, so they had lunch right after this session.
Of course.
Right, of course, because that's what they do. But they were all leaving their tables to show their friends which one was theirs. And it was like, you could see it was so meaningful to them.
That's nice.
Thing. Yeah, it's a very nice thing. It really was. And that kind of leads us to the next thing, which is radical amazement. So, this is the great 20th century philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel often began his evening lectures with this simple statement: "Ladies and gentlemen, a great miracle just happened." Gasps could be heard throughout the audience. The curiosity was palatable. What great miracle had just occurred? Heschel would pause for effect and then say, "The sun just set." Heschel had grabbed his audience with a striking example of his theme. The everyday occurrences in God's creation are miraculous. But we human beings who see the sun rise and set every day have become accustomed to the regularity. We've lost our sense of awe. For Heschel, awareness of the divine begins with wonder. He called for an attitude of radical amazement toward the world surrounding us. To see the world through the eyes of wonder is to see God's presence in everything. It was the biblical prophets who elevated the notion of wonder from surprised reaction to a form of thinking, an attitude that never ceases. This attitude of wonder leads to yirah, to awe. So this is a very interesting thing to discuss. You can go back to the list of distractions that your participants made in the beginning, or that you might make in the beginning. And you can think about if they become aware of anything in Jewish tradition that can help them to get past these distractions and practice radical amazement. So I was saying earlier about how I could see when you can't and then you can. It's a shame that I think is what it really takes for us. And maybe there are other things. I know I love to hang out with my grandson. He's 3, and everything's like so new to him, and I find that makes it new to me also. So I guess finding someone to share things with that is amazed by them is good. They don't have to be 3. They could be just the kind of person that is amazed by stuff. And sometimes I try to remind myself to appreciate things. I live in the wintertime, we live on a boat, and in the wintertime we're in Jersey City, right in New York Harbor. So the view from my window is the World Trade Center, and it's close, and the Statue of Liberty, and that's close, and the skyline is amazing. But we've been doing it for almost 9 years. So I am not always amazed by it. When people come over, they're like, whoa, or like I have Zoom meetings, I'm like, wow, where are you, But I think, I'm not sure how we remind ourselves to appreciate what we have and to, that's something I think that would be very interesting if anyone has something they want to add to that. Like, how do you remind yourself to have this radical amazement?
I don't know if this, correlates to this, but what I was thinking of is my father used to do this, and my father died before cell phones had cameras and things like that. But he looked at the pictures of food that he made. Like if he made dinner and he made something he thought was really cool, he would take a photo of it and send it to me and my sister. And over the years, I've been taking pictures of food that I make. I put it on a pretty plate or whatever. And I save it on the computer, and it just like, I'm not a chef, I'm not a amazing cook, but it's fun, and it just makes me appreciate it more.
That's actually very interesting, because you're right. It's almost like a prayer. You're remembering to take a picture of it and you're focusing on it. I know I see this on Instagram all the time, where I'm sure people take pictures. Yeah, you're right. If you have to stop for a moment and you look at it through a lens and you photograph it, you are looking at it in a new way and you're appreciating it. It's interesting that your father started that before we had such easy access to taking photos. When it used to cost money to develop them, it's a different thing. That's a really good suggestion. Thanks. Right. All right, so here's another thing that also helps us, and that's Brachot HaNehanim, the blessings of appreciation. They're an example of prayer that can help foster a sense of radical amazement. They're in everyday situations like when you see a rainbow, when you see, I was saying before, a person who has great knowledge of Jewish things or great knowledge of secular things. When you smell fragrant fruit, when you hear thunder. So for all of these situations, these are amazing things. And if you want, I can also send you a link to Brachot HaNehanim. They're very interesting. And they're almost like taking a snapshot. I love that. I'm going to add that to our notes in our follow-up email. That's really nice. Okay, so let's look at another thing that helps us focus on those wonderful things that we should not take for granted, and that is Shabbat. So that's another tool Judaism has that helps us to lead more mindful and conscious life. Shabbat's a day we set aside to stop all acts of creation and attempts to achieve mastery over our world. We're forbidden from engaging in melacha, which is like creation work. So there's an essay, Shabbat and Holidays, and the Eitz Chaim Chumash. Rabbi Joel Roth teaches that melacha is defined as a constructive human act initiated on the Sabbath, demonstrating a supremacy over nature. So in that way, we shouldn't be planting, we shouldn't be cutting flowers from, where they're living. We shouldn't be doing a lot of things, which I think we don't want to focus on the negative. We want to focus on the positive. So he says on this day, when we're forbidden from engaging in meat production, we have the opportunity to reflect on what it is that we have. As opposed to producing more, Shabbat opens the possibility of deepening our awareness of and relationship with what already exists. In addition to the prohibitions of the day, Shabbat is filled with positive commandments of what we're obligated to on this day. And many of these obligations can help us block out our everyday distractions in order to lead more mindful and conscious lives. So it's interesting because I think a lot of us don't do this anymore. I'm not going to read the text and the questions now because they're long. I'm going to share my one favorite question, which is, what enslaves you personally? Because on Shabbat, you're going to get rid of what enslaves you. I'm a big worrier, and I don't answer any work emails, and there's certain things I just don't do on Shabbat. And so that's a nice observation. And then this, I love this, what's on the screen. The word refreshed comes from the Hebrew word nefesh. The word nefesh is commonly translated as soul. So in his essay entitled Shabbat and Holidays in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, Rabbi Joel Roth notes that this word refers to a person's life essence, their vitality, their psychic energy, or essential character. And it conveys the idea of a fresh infusion of spiritual and physical vigor, a revival of God's total being. Shabbat activities lend themselves to reviving oneself, both spiritually and physically. So that, I think, is really what we need to think about when deciding what's melacha for us. Because I think that nowadays there are very few people who really, and if you do, that's great, I respect you, people who really don't do Shabbat the way traditional Shabbat has been observed. There is, in every denomination of Judaism, there is a day where we turn off our phones if you want to. I'll send you a, it might be in the supplemental materials here. There's a day, a website you can go to where you just turn off your phone one day and try it. When I do the teen groups, I say even try it for an hour. See if you can do it. Because it is so easy to be distracted, and it's so interesting to try to focus on other things. So that's biblical understandings. Now let's go to modern understandings and see what we can do about that. Okay, so the movement from weekday work to Shabbat rest has moved from acting outward to developing inward. Shabbat is more than a day of being, it's a day of becoming. Rest is more than leisure from work. It's a state of inner discovery, tranquility, and unfolding. The ability to accept and affirm life in its own right frees me to become more than I am. Self-development and through intensified relationships with others. The Sabbath commandment is not just to stop working. It's actively to achieve a state of minucha, which means rest, through self-expression, transformation, and renewal. On this day, humans are freed and commanded to explore themselves and their relationships until they attain a fullness of being. So this text is about how Shabbat's not about refraining from work. It's about self-expression and transformation and renewal. Shabbat is a response to routinization by creating a temporal counterculture, an island of special existence within the stream of time. In becoming holy, the human being shifts from unexamined life to examined life. That's an important thing. From instinctual existence to conscious being. Only one who's conscious of every moment can make choices or apply a hierarchy of values in every act of life. This doesn't have to be only Shabbat. You could try to be conscious other days too. But this is a good way to practice it. So the detailed Sabbath ritual, which appears to prescribe everything by rigid rules, is really an assertion of consciousness and one's freedom to imbue every gesture and experience with value. It takes discipline and awareness to make these moves correctly. In this area, as in so many others, freedom grows in the womb of structure. And since every gesture is willed and directional, it is rich in meaning and statement. Every move on Shabbat is part of a dance of holiness. That's what Rabbi Irving Greenberg, the Jewish way.
That's great.
Yeah. So if we want to think about our own Shabbat, what makes Shabbat for us, we have to think about this. What parts of this can we take into our lives? When I was a little girl, I was in I was brought up fairly Orthodox. I went to an Orthodox yeshiva. So I'm an artist. I couldn't draw on Saturday. I couldn't take a marker. And if, God forbid, it was Shabbat and then 2 days of, let's say, Passover, the first 2 days, those are 3 complete days that I couldn't draw. And that drove me insane. So I felt as an adult that kind of creativity was actually renewing my soul. So I do design for work. I mean, that's part of my job. I won't work, even if I love what I'm working on, I won't do that on Shabbat. But if I want to draw a picture, I will draw a picture, because to me, that's helping me to refresh myself and to reinvigorate myself. So you could look into your own experiences and what it helps you to think about what is important to you, what refreshes you, what invigorates you, and what would you do on Shabbat?
To think.
Yeah, you look like you're really thinking.
You know what? I work 4 or 5 days a week, and then when I get home, it's very routine. And when it comes to Friday night, that's when my family and I come to synagogue. That's our Shabbat. That's the beginning of our Shabbat. When Saturday comes around, in all honesty, that's when I do my errands. I'm not Shomer Shabbos. I do take some time to rest or whatever. That's my time. That's really Friday night that's when Shabbat is special, because it's in a synagogue, and it's it's a very musical congregation that we're part of, and to me that's what makes it special.
Right. There are certain things that make it special, that make Shabbat, and as you said, the fact that you can do those and you're not just doing your errands, even if you do your errands, that's what I look at too. We we're empty nesters, so we generally don't see our kids on Shabbat, but we have friends that always come over, and we all make something and we all bring it to whoever's boat. We all live on boats, so we bring it to whoever we're going to.
Well, it's tradition. Everybody has their own tradition.
Right, and it
makes
really
it unique.
makes a difference. Like, it makes your weekend start. It makes you feel what you feel. So my feeling is, when you look at Shabbat as a time for mindfulness, it's to kind of look at what's important to you. And it could be more than one thing, and to make sure you somehow get those into your experience, even if you're not doing the traditional things that are prohibited. So that brings me to what Rambam said about this. It's very interesting. So Rambam said there are 4 duties that are stated in connection to Shabbat. 2 are written in the Torah, and 2 on the authority of the scribes, being explicitly mentioned by the prophets in the Torah. In the Torah, it's written, remember and observe. And the prophets mention honor and delight, as they say, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy of the Lord clothed with honor. So what does that mean? It's from the Mishnah Torah, or Rambam wrote. It's, he lived from 1135 to 1204 in the Middle Ages. He's known as one of the greatest authorities and philosophers in post-Talmudic times. This book, the Mishnah Torah, is a codification of Jewish law. Its purpose was to clarify the laws found within the Talmud in plain language, so the law should be clear and accessible to everyone. So what we did was, I looked at this, and we made a chart, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. It describes the definitions Rambam applies to each of the 4 categories of Shabbat observance, like what he would do for remember, what he would do for observe, what he would do for delight, etc. And we can look at this chart, and then we can fill in the specific Shabbat activities that you think fall under each of these categories. And then look at the acts you filled in to the 4 quadrants, and think about which of these acts you think would help you lead a more mindful and conscious life. So you might want to do this at your session. Give your participants the opportunity to reflect on the following question. Wait, I'll show you the chart before I do that. Okay, so here, he says, remember, recite Kiddush, do a special prayer in the Amida, have Havdalah when Shabbat ends. For observe, refrain from productive creative work. You might have other ways that you observe. Honor, wear special clothes, make your house clean, bathe. If you live in the Middle Ages, that might be something you don't do as we do. Special food, decorate the table with a special cloth, a newly polished silver. And delight, joy, enjoy good food and drink, enjoy your guests, sing, rest, play games, take walks, or study Torah. So these, and you can put what you would do in those categories, and you can think about it. And you might want to discuss this with your group or just with one or two other people. Share your thinking. And I would, of course, love to hear your thinking on it. If there are like things that you would put in these categories.
Go, Sarah. I mean, Sue.
Yeah, go, Sue. I'm
Go on out.
Yeah, I'm unmuting everybody. I'll start. It's always easier. Wait, Sue, you look like you're ready to talk. Okay.
No, I was just thinking of what I would do for each one.
Right. That's what we're thinking.
I'd have to think.
Well, I mean, Kiddush is pretty easy. You know, making Kiddush and, you know, doing Havdalah, doing Hamotzi and lighting the candles. And that's an interesting thing too. So, you know how in your groups you're encouraged to pick a Jewish bucket list. And there are probably a lot of people who don't do things even as simple as this. And that might be what you want to do, maybe once a month, even if not every Friday night. Like people can bring this into their lives as part of their Jewish bucket list.
Yeah.
You know, the refraining from productive creative work. So maybe there are things you want to do that you just don't have time to do, you know, and so they might be productive in another way. Maybe you like really want to rearrange your room, or you want to spend more time with one of your family members, or I'm now a drawing for each letter of my younger grandson's name. His name's really long, so I'm doing one a month. So I'll do that, you know, and I won't do that during the week because I'm working. So I'll do that on Shabbat. You know, just pick something that really you like that's meaningful to you, and that you can put that in the observe category. Honor is nice, you know, making a nice party whenever you do it. And delight, joy, just, you know, enjoying whatever it is that you pick to do. Now, if anybody wants to say what they do in a category. Oh, I have to put the categories up again so that you can see them. Here. There. Okay. Okay. Does anybody want to share anything for any of these categories? All right. Well, I shared, so that's okay. All right. So now is a good time to look at our supplemental materials. We'll start with two organizations. There are a lot of them, but these two are especially dedicated to the practice of Jewish mindfulness. One is the Jewish Mindfulness Network. Rabbi Jill Zimmerman talks about what mindfulness is. She says Jewish mindfulness is about bringing to life ancient Jewish practices that can make our lives meaningful each day, each moment. So, as we've done everywhere where we've lived, we also have borrowed and blended other spiritual practices into Judaism and made them our own. So we've been talking about how we celebrate Shabbat, but there are other things too. I mean, there's Jewish meditation. And there are other things that, you know, that's an example of something we brought in from other cultures, but it's our own as well. So if you want to go to this website, you can find a lot of good ideas.
For the time mitzvah, for the evening mitzvah.
I was taking a whole course.
So it's just, it's interesting. It's almost finished.
Then there's the Institute for Spirituality. Those at the Institute have been introduced to mindfulness meditation as a path that can support and sustain their Jewish lives, the fulfillment of their Jewish values. Great cognitive neuroscience researchers are doing important work on the use of mindfulness techniques to create healthier lifestyles. You probably heard that. Have a healthier.
No, that's for, I think.
So one is Dr. Richard J. Davidson. He's a pioneer in the field and a confidant of the Dalai Lama. You can learn more about him at this link. And I'll add them in the follow-up email. He's a highly sought-after expert in human flourishing, including meditation and related contemplative practices. And then there's a great TED Talk with the renowned researcher, Dr. Judson Brewer. And he uses mindfulness and practices to break bad habit. So that's interesting if you're trying to quit smoking or go on a diet, or maybe there's a deeper bad habit you want to get rid of. That's a good TED Talk to watch. Then there's the American Mindfulness Research Association. It was founded in 2013. Their mission is to support empirical and conceptual efforts to establish an evidence base for the practice of mindfulness, to promote the best evidence-based standards for use of mindfulness research and its applications, and to facilitate discovery and professional development through grant giving. So if you're a person who wants to do a scientific study of this, it's a pretty, I read it. You have to really concentrate. You have to be very mindful to understand that last one, but it is interesting.
Are these in the booklet, Nina? Are these?
Yeah, they're in the back of the booklet for sure.
They're in the supplement.
Yeah.
Supplemental.
And then we're also going to have supplemental materials that will be in the newsletter that are amusing topic. Actually, I think if you go to the website, we might already have supplemental materials linked there.
In the High Mitzvah website?
Yeah, there should be supplemental materials on this topic also. So I am very glad that everybody joined me, and I am open to questions or comments or whatever you like.
So the chapter, the obviously it's on mindfulness, but it says equanimity. I'm in the right one, right? Equanimity and menifat hanefesh.
Okay, so that's it's interesting. So we have standard topics and we have Musar topics, and they relate to each other. So yes, equanimity actually is the Musar topic that relates to this. Equanimity is keeping a very even keel, learning how to. It's like being a surfer, like to just get yourself.
Good analogy.
Yeah, and mindfulness is one of the things that can help you get there. If you're really stressed about something and you are able to concentrate in the moment, then that helps you to regain your equanimity. So tomorrow is going to be a webinar focusing more on the actual equanimity. This one is focusing on one of the ways you can do it. This is one of the standard topics.
Would this be on, when you say standard topics, is this on the High Mitzvah topics?
Yeah. We have a few different tracks in High Mitzvah. We have our standard topics, which are like mindfulness, conscious living, interpersonal relationships.
Right, all the different modules. Yeah.
Right, and then we have Musar topics that relate to them. So, for example, the first standard topic is rites of passage for October, and the first Musar topic is wisdom, because you can learn from every experience. So they relate in that way.
So tomorrow there's another webinar on equanimity.
Yeah, so it's related. It's different and it has different texts.
Right.
And there's a little bit.
That's what we're doing. Musar. That's what.
Come back tomorrow.
Yeah, we're doing Musar. So okay. So that's. I won't be able to be on that one tomorrow, but can I see it at a different time, or?
Yeah, you can. So they're all recorded and posted on our website. So
that's great.
Okay.
What time tomorrow?
Noon tomorrow, just like today at noon. It has some great texts also, and some other discussions that relate to it the same way.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Nina. It's very interesting. Sometimes it's just hard you have to kind of think about certain things before you reflect on it. So it takes me a little longer because I really like to give a really honest answer, and just to blurt out something, I rather really reflect on. So do we get a copy of your slides of your presentation?
Yes, I'm going to send out a follow-up email with a copy of the slides.
Great.
And a link to the recording.
Great.
Sometimes I'll do highlights of the discussion. I love that thing about the photographs. I'll put
the photograph was great.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's
you
great.
should get that, and the I'll make a PDF out of the slides, so the links will be active. So if you want to go to the TED Talk, you can.
Great. Great. Thank
Can
you.
Nina, you mentioned emailing us that PDF of
Yeah.
the mobile.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this a note. Yes, I will put that in the follow-up email also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. It was
Same here. Have a good rest of the day. Stay warm.
you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you. Bye.